being a part of the Texas Lyceum has really been life-changing, and I don't say that lightly. Everyone who knows me knows that the Lyceum is one of my priorities when it comes to my schedule. Some of the best friends I have made in my life are from the Texas Lyceum. And importantly, I'm challenged on a regular basis around my beliefs and my ideas and the ideologies around a wide variety of issues. And so the Lyceum for me has really diversified my life, enriched my life, challenged me, sharpened me, and really introduced me to a whole wonderful group of people, including Joseph.
In 2018 or 2017 when I announced my run for Congress, I surprised a lot of my Republican friends when I ran as a Democrat. And I think I surprised even more Democrats in the state of Texas when I ran as a former Republican. And so that was in the primary days. And that's when I got to see Jen Sarver from time to time on the campaign trail as a friend and colleague in the Lyceum. She was running as a Republican in the primary. I was running as a Democrat in my primary, and it was a lot of fun. And Jen, I look forward to this conversation today.
Yeah, for me, you have to think back to 2017. Lamar Smith had held this seat for over 3 decades, and he decided to step down really late in the year in 2017. And so imagine this was after the 2016 election cycle, which had been acrimonious at best. And I did not see in my party people representing me the way that I wanted to be represented. I felt like we had lost our civility. We'd lost our ability to communicate effectively, have strong ideals and values, but talk about people with such disdain and with such language that I often joked. I told people, if kindergartners talked the way some of our elected officials did, they would be kicked out of school or they would be punished. And so I was raised in a family that taught we treat people with respect, dignity and respect, whether we agree with them or not. And so when I stepped into that arena in that November of 2017, I knew I was going to have a tough uphill battle. And so often Joseph and I, when we got that Express News, both of us were endorsed for either side. We chuckled. We thought it was really funny because it was exactly what the Lyceum is all about. And so if you can have two people who stand on opposite sides of the aisle, but reach their hands across that aisle to say, I don't agree with you on everything, and we're never going to agree on all things. But what we do agree on is we want to move our country, our state, our city, our community forward, and let's work on the things we can work on together. And I think, we send people to Washington who stand on the edges that scream at each other, and then we're surprised when things don't get done and there's gridlock.
Yeah, like Jen, I was thrilled to receive that San Antonio Express News endorsement, but even more honored to receive that endorsement alongside Jen as a fellow member of the Lyceum. And I think it speaks volumes about what attracted both of us to the Lyceum. And in my case, I found it really surprising how many candidates, whether they be in our race or in other races, how many feel like they needed a handler or they needed talking points or they needed someone to keep them on message. I think that's part of the problem with our politics is too many people are running because they want to be part of some power grid. They want to be part of some institution or political industrial complex rather than lead from within or lead from the heart, which is, look, this is who I am. These are my beliefs. This is what I believe in. And that made it very similar to Jen while I was out on the campaign trail. I rarely ever had to have notes. Why? Because I had life experiences in these areas that would come up on the campaign trail. And so I was able to say things, oftentimes controversial to my friends on the left, or oftentimes controversial to my friends on the right. But I figured if I was getting beat up from the left and the right enough, which I was probably doing something right. And that was rewarding and gratifying in the sense that I felt like I didn't need to change.
I think for me, it comes down to one word, and that word is relationships. You can go to a conference every day of the week and meet people with different ideas, but it's not until you're in relationship with somebody, maybe over a beer or a glass of iced tea, late night sitting in a hotel lounge, talking about the issues you just discovered in that conference, that you really build relationships and you build the trust that you can ask those hard questions. I think one of the things that's really neat about the Lyceum is if you've built a relationship with somebody, you have that authentic relationship and the ability to push on some tough areas and to say, listen, this might be insensitive or this might be too far, but it would really help me understand this more if I could ask you this tough question. And because there's that relationship and that trust, you can dive a little deeper on some of these issues. And again, not that we're trying to change change anybody's mind. We're just trying to make sure people have the opportunity to hear from all perspectives. Joseph and I see each other on a regular basis, and we always have a good time with one another because we've built a relationship over years. If we had ended up in the race against each other, I think we would have had more laughs on stage than yelling at one another. And I think a lot of people, told us, listen, I'd be happy if either one of you won, because we were close enough to the center and people that recognize the power of bringing people together.
What I always love about any event, whether it be Lyceum or beyond, in issues of civility is to chip around the edges, to figure out where the end is on that belief, whether, well, and we won't have to go into all the different issues, but there's always a part where a person says, yes, but. And I love getting that yes, but to find out what the edges are of their beliefs, because oftentimes that's where you can't go past, or more importantly, where you can find the overlap in the issues that you have together. So for leaders at all levels in the state of Texas that are looking for ways to be able to start getting those quick wins, to be able to learn better techniques on how to cross the aisle, I'd say a couple of different things. Let me just throw out the obvious. The obvious is find a time to meet that member or that other elected official outside of work in private if you need. We've all heard the stories of the DC crowd who, for instance, don't even want to meet with their colleagues out in public because they'll be photographed and they'll be put on TV. Luckily, a lot of our state officials aren't well known enough yet in social media that they can meet for a beer, break bread, just get to know them outside of work. That's the first thing. Second thing is whatever they do, and I know in representing their constituents, they have to take everything personally and represent and fight, fight, fight. But so much of that language doesn't help, to be honest. And what I'm looking for is ways to find answers, ways to find common ground, find rather than fight.
I think one of the things I would encourage our leaders, elected officials in particular, those interested in running for office to think about is that it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. I think the language of winners and losers and warfare applied to politics is one of the problems with how we interact with one another. There's always an opportunity to expand the pie. Texas should be a state that says we are big enough for everyone's ideas. We are big enough for everyone to succeed. You don't have to fail in order for me to succeed. So it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. I also think one of the things I encourage people to do on a regular basis is to kind of stop focusing on the national politics and start focusing locally. There's so much you can do to make an impact on your community. So whether you're an individual citizen, you are somebody in a community, you can take actions to help serve your community and get involved on a local basis. And I think if enough of us kind of got outside of our own heads and off of the national political stage and focused more on our communities, we could serve our communities in powerful ways that would have ripple effects across the state.
To focus on local issues or local rivalries rather than national politics is not only genius, but think about it in terms of our sports. You and I have had this conversation many times. How is it that Aggies and Longhorns for a couple of days of the year in sports, in the stadiums, can be bitter rivals, but then later on they're best friends or beer drinking buddies, or plenty of couples that we know that are a mixed family? That's the first thing. We're wearing our politics like a jersey, and that only causes conflict because then you have to defend everything that your party or your team does.
And when you can do life with people and set aside those political labels, there's something really magical about that. And I think about that phrase that you can't hate up close. And I think we see a lot of hate in our politics right now. And it's really hard to hate people that you've hung out with and you've had a beer with. And, Joseph and I have been at a beer garden. We were at a party recently for another Lyceumite together, laughing and joking and talking about our costumes for the party. And so I don't think that there's a day in Austin that I am not running into a Lyceumite in person or somewhere online. And that's the power of the organization, the network that kind of keeps on giving. And I'm sure, Joseph, you get this a lot these days too, but the question is, when are you running again? We need people like you in politics. And so one of these days we'll break through and create that third party, that maybe it's just a Lyceum party that we need to create that has a space for folks who want to actually work together and get things done for Texas.
Yes, so many Lyceum folks came on to help out early in our campaign. In fact, one such candidate, before she was even a candidate herself, donated to my campaign. That's the power of the Lyceum.
Yes, I think I was an early contributor to Joseph's campaign.
Yes, you were. But we didn't talk about that once we got closer to the end. I mean,
I did remember your staff member telling me at one point in time, listen, we would be happy if you won as well. We'd love to
oh,
run
heck
again.
yeah. Oh, heck yeah. That when Jen did text me and say, did you see that Lamar Smith has now dropped out of your race? And I was like, oh, yeah, it's a big day for our campaign. She, just want to let you know that I'm going to run to fill that seat. And I was thrilled. Now, I did have one moment of pause because I know Jen would have beat me. So I didn't necessarily want the best candidate in the other side running against me. But if it was going to lose to anyone, I would love to lose to Jen Sarver.
For me, I knew that if I didn't win that race, that it was going to create more of a platform for me to have conversations around civility. And that has been the truth for me. And certainly, Joseph, I know for you, you have an enormous network that was built in large part during that campaign. And so I'm always encouraging people to run for office because you don't know what comes next. Win or lose, you can have an opportunity to make an impact. And I hope that I'm somebody at the end of my life, I want them to look back and say, she lived a life that mattered. And that's my motto. And that's what I think about every single day. The Lyceum gives me an opportunity to do that with gusto all the time.